In this video, I'll be sharing the lessons I learned from the amazing tutorials by Gleb Alexandrov from Creative Shrimp and how I integrated this new color grading workflow into my process. All the credit goes to him for sharing this game changing information. Link to his channel in the description below. I totally recommend checking the tutorials out if you want to step up your color grading workflow. How are we going to implement this workflow? So, the Blender to DaVinci Resolve workflow. So, there are two important steps here, which is the first step and the second step. So the first step is the file format that we're going to be exporting in from Blender, which is going to be OpenEXR file format. And then the next step, which is the color management, which we're going to be doing in DaVinci Resolve. So these are very important steps that we have to get right. And then after that, we can do our color correction and then our color grading. So this is the steps that we're going to be taking to get the final look that we are looking for. So from Blender, the output properties, the file format, the color and the depth, color depth, and then the codec are going to be specific to what we are going to be doing. So which is going to be the OpenEXR file format, RGB, float, half and 16-bit, DWAA, lossy. And then this is a good reference to actually see why we are going to be exporting in OpenEXR by Robin Squares. And then the video name is Why I Never Render PNG. In Blender, in your file that you have opened, when you're going to be exporting your file, you have to go into your output properties and then you have to change your file format into OpenEXR and then the color is RGB or RGBA. So the A stands for alpha channel if you have an alpha channel in your image or in your animation. And then the color depth is the one that we are going to be using is going to be float half for 16-bit color channels. And then the codec is going to be DWAA, lossy. So this is basically it, how we are going to be exporting our image or our animation from Blender. Let's get our base right, which is color management, which is the most important thing to get right when you're going to be color grading or doing color correction. So with color management, what we are trying to do is to get a proper image at the end or a proper image that we are going to be viewing on our screen. But before that, we have to do certain things to get to that final result. And then for that, we are going to be using two nodes, a CST in node and then another CST out node, but they're going to be doing this in DaVinci Resolve. So on the left side, which is going to be our source image that we're going to be importing into Blender. So this is the OpenEXR file format, which is going to be linear X709. It has all of the dynamic range. And then this is a linear format. And then we want to convert this linear format into a log format because the log format is going to be something that DaVinci Resolve can work with instead of the linear format so that we can grade our image. And then after that, we are going to convert that log format into a display format, which is now the display format, meaning that this the monitor that we're going to be color grading in. So that is basically it. And then for the CST, it means color space transform. This is a look at the settings that we are going to be applying to our CST in node and then to our CST out node. And then a few shortcuts that are very important when you're going to be color grading is the Shift S to add a serial node before a current node, a selected node, and then the Control S, which is going to be add a serial node after the current node, and then Control D to enable or disable a selected node, and then a custom node, which is used tab here to label selected node. So when I select a node and I want to label it, I can just press tab and then I can give that uh, node a name, its name. DaVinci Resolve, we're going to import our render. Just gonna drag it into the timeline. Just gonna drag it, and then we have our image or render, our EXR5 format here in Blender. And then initially you're going to see that it does not look proper. That's where we are now going to be doing our what we call our color management so that it will look how we want it to look, especially when you're going to be showing it on our display. Because at the moment it's in a linear format, we want to show it in a display format. But before we do that, I would like you to go into DaVinci Resolve top here and then key customization. And then I'm just gonna say label here. And then for that, the reason is that I want to set my label selected node to tab. So I'm just going to click here because at the first time it's going to be empty, and then I'm gonna press tab, and then I've set a shortcut for tab. So whenever I click on tab on my nodes, it's going to give me the option to actually name my node. So that's a very important or tip that I can give you when you're going to be labeling your nodes in the color page. Save, and then I'm gonna close that. Now we go into our color page. So in our color page, a few things that are very important. So the first step that we have to do is to make sure that our color management is set. That's the first thing that we have to do. And then for that, we need two nodes. So the CST in node and the CST out node. So click on the first one and press tab. And then now I can actually immediately type CST in. And then for the next one, press tab CST out. So these are the two nodes that are important at the beginning of our color grading, which is the color management. And then we are just going to drag in our effects, we're just going to drag our color space transform into both of these nodes. And then in the first node, we're going to change our color space. So the input color space coming from Blender is going to be Rec 709. And then the input gamma is going to be linear. So this is the linear format that we have from Blender Straight. And then now we want to convert this linear format into a log format so that we'll be able to grade it properly in DaVinci Resolve. So for that, we're going to use DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then we are going to use DaVinci Intermediate for the output gamma. And then we can kind of see that our highlights are a bit clipped. We want to fix that. So still in DaVinci. So for that, we go into the tone mapping method and set it to none. And then now we want to convert that log format into a display format, which is either Rec 709. That is the one that we are going to be using. So for that, check very carefully the output color space and the output gamma. They are now going to become our input color space and our input gamma. So this one is DaVinci Wide Gamut, and then this one is going to be DaVinci Intermediate, and then the output color space is going to be Rec 709, and then our output gamma is going to be gamma 2.2. So that is my choice at the moment. And then still for the tone mapping method, I'm going to choose DaVinci Resolve, DaVinci, and then use custom needs. And then I'm going to set this to maximum to preserve my highlights. Fly forward or OTF is set. So basically now we are done with our color management. So after that, we can now do what we call our color grading. So for that, now we need a few things here. So before this, we can add a node before the CST in, and then this node, we're going to call it exposure, because now we can actually adjust our exposure before we actually turn it into a log format. We can actually adjust our exposure here. And then after that, let's create our node tree. So a simple node tree setup based on the steps that we're going to be taking. So the first part is going to be the first part of color management, and then the second layer is going to be the color correction, and then after that we're going to be doing our color grading, and then after that we're going to be adding our effects, and then after that we are going to be doing our last part or the second part of color management. So this is basically like the node tree setup that we're going to be using in. And then now I'm going to label all of these nodes, and then so thing is named proper. This is now our node setup that we are going to be using, or our color grading workflow that we are going to be using when we're going to be grading our images or our animation, which is amazing. Now we actually have all the dynamic range. We can adjust all of the things that we want properly. So I'm just gonna go through the image, and then I'm just gonna edit a few things. I'm not gonna edit everything. I'm just gonna add just a few information just to make you see how some of the things are going to be changed, but very important. So the exposure, I'm going to start with that one, and then I'm just gonna increase the exposure just a little bit. so that it becomes a little bit of a brighter image. So just a brighter image that I'm looking for. And then in my primaries, go into my primaries, and then I'm going to increase my contrast just to bring that pop back. There's a little bit of contrast within the image. And then I'm just going to go into my glow. Then I'm going to add my glow into that one. Then with the glow, an effect that I like to use is to change the composite mode to screen. And then I can decrease this just a little bit so that it can give me that nice glow image. Otherwise, I can just go here so and then decrease my opacity so that it doesn't become bright. Basically, you can do a lot of stuff, but you can do it in here, in between most of this stuff, the CST in and the CST out. So this is just the overall idea of how you're going to be implementing an EXR file format workflow. Very powerful workflow. You are able to actually adjust the raw data that is coming straight from Blender, which is a powerful workflow that gives you sort of like a wide range of actually adjust a lot of things that you want. Otherwise, you can go into detail, you can adjust as smallest things that you want. So it becomes quite easy to kind of play around with your color grades as well. These are the channels that I would recommend if you want to get to know more about color grading, just in terms of DaVinci Resolve, to get an idea of like how to do your own color grades, how to get the look that you're looking for. These are the channels that I would recommend you look into.